There's a question that almost never gets asked when people talk about animated films. A question that seems minor on the surface, but once you actually stop and sit with it, reveals something fundamental about the way we tell stories and the models we offer to the people who grow up with these films. That question is, how do we represent men in animation? And more specifically, why are the male characters in Disney and Ghibli so radically different from each other? Because this isn't just about an aesthetic choice or a difference in budget. We're talking about two fundamentally opposing visions of what masculinity is, what it should be, and how it can be depicted in a story. And today, we're going to break both of them down. We're going to look at Disney's archetypes, what they get right and where they fall short. We're going to look at Ghibli's male characters, their subtlety and their depth. And we're going to try to understand why these differences exist, because the answer to that question is going to completely change the way you see both studios. Let us start with Disney. And let us be straight about it. Disney's male characters are some of the most iconic in all of animation history. But they do tend to fall into a few very specific categories. First, there is the adventurous hero, the most classic archetype of them all. Aladdin is the perfect example. Bold, charismatic, driven to prove his worth. His entire arc centers on one simple question: do I deserve to be loved for who I actually am, not for who I pretend to be? That is something genuinely touching. His self-worth struggle gives him a dimension that many Disney male characters do not have. And it is precisely because his conflict is internal, as much as external, that he remains memorable. Simba in The Lion King is also an adventurous hero, but in a slightly different register. As a child, he is impulsive, impatient, hungry for greatness. Then the most devastating betrayal of his life happens, and everything falls apart. His arc is about grief, guilt, running away, and finally returning to himself. What is beautiful about Simba's arc is that it is both deeply personal and universally recognizable. But at its core, it is still a story about reclaiming a rightful place, a story about fulfilling a destiny. The structure stays familiar. Then there's what you might call the comedic anti-hero. Kuzco in The Emperor's New Groove is the best example of this category done right. At the start of the film, this character is genuinely insufferable, self-centered, arrogant, completely indifferent to how his actions affect anyone else. And it's precisely his flaws that become the comedic engine of the movie. But the film uses that humor intelligently, because it never pretends that Kuzco doesn't need to change. His transformation into a humble and self-aware leader is the real heart of the story, and it happens through laughter. It's an honest and effective way to talk about personal growth. Then there are the noble figures like Mufasa. Upright, naturally good, morally exemplary characters. They exist primarily to provide contrast to the more flawed protagonists. They are moral reference points more than characters with genuine developmental arcs. They impress, they inspire, but they never really surprise. And then there are the romantic supports, Prince Eric and Flynn Rider. These characters exist primarily to complement the female protagonist's story. Eric is charming and well-intentioned, but he has almost no inner life of his own. Flynn, on the other hand, is far more interesting. He starts as a cocky, self-serving thief, and his relationship with Rapunzel gradually forces him to show genuine vulnerability and drop his facade. His arc is one of the most satisfying in Disney's recent catalog because he genuinely changes. And finally, there are the comedic sidekicks, Mushu, Timon, and Pumbaa. Personally, these are often my favorites. They make us laugh, they push the story forward, and in their best moments, they deliver truths the main protagonists could not say as directly. But their personal arcs always remain secondary. They exist in support, never at the center. These archetypes work. They're narratively efficient, easy to understand, and easy to love. They fit perfectly into the kind of stories Disney wants to tell. Stories of escape, triumph, and romance, where the hero overcomes external obstacles to reach a clear destination. But their limitations are just as obvious. Most of these characters are predictable. Their conflicts are primarily external, and they almost always end up getting what they wanted, including the girl. There are a few notable exceptions. Quasimodo, in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, is one of the most atypical male characters in all of Disney. He does not fit into any category. He is not the adventurous hero. He is not the romantic prince. He is a profoundly lonely character, rejected because of his appearance, who simply yearns to be accepted and to belong somewhere. His arc is not a quest for glory. It is a quest for dignity. And what makes him even more striking is that he does not get the girl at the end. His heroism does not lead to a fairy tale ending. His story is more honest, more painful, and consequently far more real. But characters like him remain rare in the Disney canon. Now let us step into Ghibli's world, and everything changes. Ghibli's male characters do not feel like movie characters. That is their greatest real strength. Take Ashitaka in Princess Mononoke. Following him from his village to the west, you watch him walk, ride, trade, meet people, and rest after a long day. There is something strangely real about his presence on screen, nothing performative in his behavior. He is reserved, thoughtful, and attentive to everything around him. His quest is not to win a princess or reclaim a throne. It is to find a balance between human progress and the preservation of the natural world. He is driven by compassion, not ambition. He seeks solutions without needing to be recognized as a hero in return. That fundamental selflessness is something you almost never see in male characters in Western animation. Haku in Spirited Away does not steal the spotlight, and yet his role is essential. He is deeply tied to Chihiro's development, helping her find her own inner strength while simultaneously grappling with his own questions about identity. He is not the protagonist, but his presence resonates throughout the entire film in a subtle and profound way. Ghibli has this unique ability to make secondary characters unforgettable, precisely because they do not try to occupy the center of the stage. Seiji, Whisper of the Heart, is another fascinating example. He's not a hero in any conventional sense. He doesn't go on grand adventures or accomplish spectacular feats. He simply pursues his dream with a quiet, steady persistence in the background of the female lead's story. And it's precisely that understated presence that supports Shizuku in her own search for herself. He doesn't try to dominate her story. He makes room for it. And then there is Howl in Howl's Moving Castle. Where Seiji is quiet, Howl is excessive, theatrical, vain, obsessed with his appearance, capable of spectacular meltdowns when things do not go his way. But behind all that theater, there is something far more fragile. His vanity is a shield. Underneath it lives a deep insecurity, a visceral fear of loss. His real character arc has very little to do with saving the world, even though he does a bit of that too. It is an arc of accepting his own vulnerability, of learning to genuinely care for someone else, and of learning to face the consequences of his choices rather than running from them. His transformation is one of the most psychologically complex you will find in any animated film. What makes Ghibli's male characters so memorable is that they are rarely at the center of the story. In most Ghibli films, the main character is a woman or a girl. The male characters orbit around her, support her, and interact with her without ever trying to take the spotlight. Their arcs are oriented toward inner growth rather than external recognition. They are not trying to win a battle or be celebrated. They are trying to understand, evolve, and help. Their relationships with the female protagonists do not always end in romance. Haku and Chihiro, San and Ashitaka, Pazu and Shita. Howl and Sophie leans romantic, but even then, it does not look like a conventional fairy tale. These bonds are more nuanced, more honest. Sometimes romantic, sometimes more like a deep friendship, sometimes simply human. That ambiguity, far from being frustrating, is exactly what makes them feel real. This difference between the two studios is not trivial. It says something very specific about how masculinity is understood across two different cultures. Disney's approach reflects a Western storytelling tradition deeply rooted in the concept of the hero. The hero's journey, triumph, achievement. The male protagonist is at the center. He faces external obstacles, and he proves his worth through action. It is a vision of masculinity as performance, as demonstration, as conquest. Ghibli's approach, on the other hand, is anchored in Japanese storytelling traditions that value subtlety, introspection, and the interconnectedness of people with each other and with their environment. Ashitaka is not trying to win. He is trying to find balance. Haku is not trying to impress. He is trying to understand. This vision of masculinity is about strength in restraint. Emotional intelligence is a core skill. Vulnerability is a sign of depth, not weakness. This shows up in the narrative structure itself. In the West, we are accustomed to what we call the three-act structure: setup, conflict, resolution. The entire story is built around conflict. Without conflict, there is no story. It is a narrative model that naturally pushes toward characters defined by what they overcome. In Japan, there is a different narrative structure called Kishotenketsu, made up of 4 parts: Ki, the introduction; Sho, the development; Ten, the turn or twist; and Ketsu, the conclusion. What is fundamental about this structure is that it does not rely on conflict. It relies on change and growth. The quiet moments in Ghibli films are not pauses between action sequences. They are narratively essential moments where characters breathe, observe, feel, and evolve. These moments can confuse Western audiences, conditioned to expect every scene to serve the main conflict, but they are precisely what gives Ghibli characters their particular depth. Disney has evolved, and that deserves acknowledgement. Characters like Wreck-It Ralph, whose entire arc is about self-acceptance and emotional maturity, show that the studio is capable of stepping outside its own boxes. Even if these characters often remain predictable in their trajectory, they represent real progress compared to the nameless princes of Disney's early decades. But the real question isn't just which studio makes better male characters. The real question is, what do we want these characters to teach us? Animated films reach tens of millions of people from the earliest age. They form ideas, they create expectations, they draw blueprints. If we keep presenting masculinity solely as bravery, action, and conquest, we are missing something essential. Characters like Ashitaka, Haku, Seiji, and Howl show that masculinity can also be reserved, introspective, emotionally intelligent, and deeply empathetic. A man can be defined not by his victories, but by the way he takes care of others. This way of being is just as valid, just as strong, and just as worthy of being told. Both approaches have their place. Sometimes you want to watch Hercules save the world, or Tarzan swing through the forest with Jane. It is fun, it is thrilling, and Disney has absolutely mastered that. But the characters who leave a lasting mark, the ones you are still thinking about long after the credits roll, are usually the ones who feel like real people with real contradictions, real fears, and real vulnerabilities. We need both. We need the grandeur of Disney heroes to dream, and the depth of Ghibli characters to grow. But if we are being honest, It is the second category that cinema needs most right now. More Ashitaka, more Haku, more Howl. Male characters who prove that you can be strong without being invincible, courageous without being spectacular, and deeply human without that looking anything like weakness. Because when you get down to it, maybe that is the most interesting kind of masculinity to tell stories about. Not the kind that conquers, the kind that grows. So tell me in the comments, which male animated character has stayed with you the most, and why? Do you think animation has a responsibility in how it depicts what it means to be a man? I read everything, and I think this conversation can go a very long way.